Welcome to Conversations With. My name is Shaley Hoogendoorn, and I live with Bipolar II Disorder. Sharing with others is healing, both individually and collectively. Sharing our stories will educate others, bring more understanding, shed more light, and smash more stigma. Our voices need to be heard. Our stories aren't over yet. This is Bipolar. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of This is Bipolar. If you're new here, I'm Shaley Hoogendoorn. My pronouns are she, her. I am a mom, I'm a teacher, and a creator and a podcaster, and I live with Bipolar II Disorder and think of myself as a mental health activist, a bipolar advocate, and I am so excited about my guest today. Before we introduce her, I just wanted to remind you, I started subscriptions on Instagram. So if you want to see more, hear more, or just support the work I'm doing, I would love for you to go on there. DM me if you don't know how, but basically you press the subscribe and it figures it all out for you. Also, you get exclusive extra footage podcast. And so my guest and I are going to have some extra stuff. So once you hear it here and you love her, you're going to want to go there. So without further ado, I will introduce you to my new best friend. Her name is Hannah Blum. Like, who gets that awesome of a name? Mine's Hoogendoorn.
Thank you. Love it. Are you kidding me? Rock that last name. That's fantastic.
Yeah, there's a lot of O's. There's a lot of O's. But Hannah is, I came across her work. All of you all know our co-host Julie. Julie introduced me to her work, and Hannah has just put language to things that I felt inside and actually have never been able to express before. So I feel so seen in her writing. We are going to talk about her new book. I'm so excited. Oh, mind, where have you gone today? And clearly, I just want to thank you for putting a redhead on the front, because I feel like there was some representation here. I was like, this book was meant for me.
Always. The artist of that, if you want to hear something interesting,
Yes,
is the
I
artist
do.
that did that. Her name is Ash Walker. But the thing is she knows I have blonde hair, but when she read the manuscript, that was the first thing that came to her. It started with a woman with red hair. So basically, my book is based off a woman with red hair.
Yes. Thank you for writing me a book.
Of course. I mean, we're besties now.
I just want to dive into everything. But before that, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? Where are you from? What do you love? Who are you?
Oh my gosh, who am I? I wear many different hats, but I am Hannah Blum, as you said, and I am a writer, an author, and a mental illness activist. That's where I started. I have a blog. I'm a blogger. I've been in this world for about a decade, which I can't believe I'm saying. And mental illness and advocacy has really been a core of my art. And I've been able to build, I'd like to say, a community of people with, I think people that are looking to be empowered, that have kind of been shamed for their emotions. Of course, though, people with mental illness. I live with bipolar II disorder. I came out with that and came out with the blog. They kind of came together. And that's when I started writing and sharing my art and activism about mental illness. And, I wear many hats. I'm living in Washington, D.C. I love it. And that's pretty much the short and sweet of me.
I love it. I love it, because we're going to go into all the rest of you as we start. I'm so excited, and I'm so grateful for your activism. Like, there was not a lot of people out there. There was not any writing. I was desperate. I was diagnosed in 2010, and I was desperate. And so when I found your work, I was like, oh, maybe I'll tell people one day. And then here I am.
Oh my gosh, what a beautiful, that makes me so happy. That makes me really happy, because I definitely agree that I was like one of the first on Instagram to come be open and like about bipolar disorder, saying I have it. To
Yeah.
see it's kind of grown
Yeah.
now, I would say, yeah, over a decade later is quite interesting. Actually, in like 2016, I wrote an article for Teen Vogue that said Instagram will be the next platform for mental health advocacy, which it ended up being.
Way to go.
Instagram, I
I
do. I
Me
know.
too, me too. I always joke, I call the other one the TikToks, and I'm like trying to get on, do the
Oh, it's
TikTok.
hard.
But my teenagers are like, you're mom, you're embarrassing. And I'm like,
No, it's hard.
whatever, whatever.
Right.
But I just I love Instagram. And as much as we, talk badly about social media, honestly, it's life-saving for me to have these connections. Like I don't regularly meet until I started sharing
Yeah.
bipolar folks all around, and just to see that there's there's more out there, the stats, but to
Yes.
like me and you right here, it's just like my whole body just relaxes. I'm like, I don't have to be anything, I don't have to mask anything. We were joking about we might cut each other off, we speak each other's fast language.
Chop and dice, slice and dice.
Yeah. Well, I would love to bring it back, Hannah.
Yes.
I would love to hear about your childhood, and if
Mhm.
or when did you feel different? Did you notice that maybe you
Yeah.
felt more feelings? I'd love for you to bring me back there.
Yes, of course. Oh my gosh, what a great question. Well, I had a wonderful upbringing. Okay, shout out to my parents. I really did. So, growing up, I was very fortunate to have a very supportive, loving family, which is seems kind of rare today. So, I'm very grateful for that. Did I feel different? I did. I felt different. I think I felt different, and I see that looking back.
Mm.
At the time, I didn't know that I was different, but my imagination has always been intensely active. And I know everybody says, hey, all kids have imaginations. I
Mm.
know that. I was a nanny for 8 years. I know they have imagination, but mine was constant.
Mm.
I won't say disassociating, but I would craft stories in my head constantly. Everything had a meaning. Every person was like a character. And it was fun, it was fun. I think later on it came with being emotional and those extremes became present. But I also, during my childhood, again, when I look back, I'm in my 30s, and I look back at some of the things I was writing as a child. I never knew I was going to be a writer, but I did love to write stories, express myself. When I look at it, I'm like, whoa, like you were definitely feeling some like things, and you could see it in the letters and cards that I would write to like my grandparents. It was very emotionally in tune. And so that was definitely present, but it wasn't until really the teenage years that I said things kind of, wait, actually, not teenage years, because I remember like at 9 or 10, I started with a little bit of an eating disorder. I became curious about it. So I think I call it the beginning of the disconnect,
Mm.
there, disconnect from body, and then it slowly progressed. High school, had a great high school experience. I was prom queen. I looked, like I had
Ooh.
everything together. Yeah, no, yeah, I'm not just throwing it out there, but
I love it.
the reason too I say it is because that's also when I had my breakdown. So
Mm.
it's this idea that you never know what people are going through on the inside. Um,
Right.
and then yeah, so then oh, wait. So you haven't gotten into the whole diagnosis. You just wanted to know the childhood part.
Yeah, well, I wanna know everything, but now I'm
Yeah.
completely intrigued by this time in your life. It sounds, vaguely familiar. I was not
Yeah.
the prom queen, but just the looking like that my life was amazing. And like you, I
Yeah.
had, my parents, uh, obviously, my parents were a little on the relaxed side and hippie side,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
having an anxious child, some of the things that we did, probably looking back, if we had known, we might not have, like,
Right,
we moved a lot, all that kind of stuff. But
right.
I thought that that was an important point, and if you're, listening and you love someone and or just you have bipolar yourself, one of the things about bipolar is that it's not completely rooted, like, in trauma, right? It's
Oh my
not
gosh, I'm so
it's
glad
a
you said that.
yeah, it's a brain illness, right? So that it doesn't completely it isn't the same as, like, borderline or other ones
Right.
that cause that, and I think that that's a big misunderstanding
It is.
about bipolar disorder, and so it's hard for people to look for it because because it's
They'll
they
think you're 100. I am so glad you said that because that's something I've been writing about and like really want to talk about is that I think a little bit where the mental health movement with psychologists and stuff kind of talking about mental illness, which don't even get me started in a lot of those areas. But the thing is, there's some ways that they do discuss it that I find to be very harmful. And that's the idea that debating whether or not it's real, that something must have happened to you in your childhood. Something, it has to be rooted. Your parents must have done something, that it's not this condition, it's from, childhood trauma. And look, were there things that happened in my childhood like every other human being
yeah,
alive? Yes. Was it to the extent compared to other people? What would make me, I didn't have the worst childhood in the world. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
why was it then that I was diagnosed when the kid who was put in foster care didn't have any parents, but is living, a life in therapy and stuff? How is it I have this diagnosis, they don't? So I think your trauma idea, I think people do have to be careful with that, because when you think that, for the people that feel like they had everything growing up, that they did have a supportive family, they feel very guilty.
Mhm.
They feel a lot of shame because they're like, people and you see people that came from very traumatic backgrounds, and you're like, I don't have a right to be
Yes.
upset. I don't have a right. And that's a very dangerous narrative to push, and it keeps you from getting help.
Exactly, exactly. It's like, what do I have to be sad about, right? And
Exactly.
society is kind of like, what's wrong? What's wrong? And what I'm really trying to, and my friends are so open to listening, and I tend to do it. It's human nature. We want to know the reason, right? The reason. And
Right.
the fact is, like, I get completely depressed for no reason. Like,
Yes.
some things can trigger it, but, like, it's for no reason. So sometimes asking me, what happened is, like, heartbreaking because I feel like I need to make up a reason. I was
Yes.
literally having I've been speaking about it since 2016, like, whether it be, I do, public speaking, and then this podcast happened in 2020, and I was thinking even the other day that affects me because I was talking to my daughter's boyfriend and I was saying, like, sometimes I don't feel like I should take up this space with my
Mhm.
podcast because, I'm managing well, or it's always this, there are people worse off. And so, like, some days, as our brain does, I'm like, do I even have bipolar? Right? And so I'm like,
Right.
I feel like a fraud, right? Because
Oh, I find that interesting. I find that interesting because I think that if you are well, it is why I think the people that we can, because the bottom line for me is I have my moments, but compared to other people with it, I am not naive to the fact that there are levels. That's why, is because if you are someone that can manage it in many ways, that can speak up, I think it's more of an incentive
yeah.
for you to be able to do the podcast and speak and bring that community together and get awareness for those people.
Yeah, yeah, and I didn't like, I know all that, but I didn't think that was still there, so when it came out, I was like, there's some self-stigma. There's some
Oh, yeah.
societal things that I have completely absorbed, and so and I think too, I always remind people, like, it's so vulnerable to show up on here and show up on the
Oh,
podcast.
yeah.
So, and my like armor is dressing up. And so I look like I'm all, like, oh, she has
Love
it
it.
all together. And I just want to remind people that even with medication, even with the things like that's why, even though it's hard, I show up on Instagram a total mess. Like all the time. I'm just like, I've made a pact with myself that I won't just that I'll show up in the messy middle, right?
Yeah.
Which is hard because I like to talk about like that
Yes.
it's over or this idea of healing not being linear. I had my first, like, since I had meds, it took the depression mostly away. I had my first like low grade depression that was, consistent, but didn't feel like before. So I didn't know.
Mhm.
Anyways, and I literally felt like, "Oh, we're here. You're here again." Like, I was, like, mad at myself, but I
Yes.
know the
Yes.
things. Have you ever felt like that?
Yes, be wait, explain, like, being mad at yourself about what?
So, I almost think, like, "Oh, well, you're an activist. You're like, how are we back here again?" I get like that when I get back in an episode, like, "How are we back here again?"
Oh, okay,
Right?
I
And,
see.
like, as if it's my fault, right? When it's
Right,
an illness. Do you ever
absolutely.
self-stigmatize?
Okay, I know exactly what you're talking about. As far as my own personal experience with that, I think because through learning about mental illness, the history, really studying it over the last decade, being around a lot of people with mental
Mm,
illness, the one thing that I realized was we have this belief again a lot because society tells us that cures are possible, that healing is possible. If I sit on a mountaintop and and just like listen to the birds, suddenly I'm going to be centered and manifest the life without bipolar. This is untrue. And so,
yes.
yeah, I mean, maybe, in an alternate world, maybe AI may take us somewhere, but no, for now. And why I'm saying that as it relates to what you're saying is I try to promote and want people to understand because I saw that what you went through was a problem, was
Yeah.
that we set ourselves up for disappointment.
Mhm.
And, we tell ourselves when we get to a place where it feels good that the minute we drop, we're failures, we're
Yeah.
losers, we're
Yeah.
sick, we're ill.
Mhm.
And that is a very that is going to lead to a cycle of disappointment. So
Yeah.
what I realize is that, and I think the better answer is what I accepted was
Yes.
I have a condition and it does put me on a roller coaster, and that's my life. And that's okay. There are people with other disabilities. They're their
Yeah.
life. They're not gonna, get cured of a lot of things. I have family members that have diseases and it's never gonna go away. And we kind of have to accept in many ways that. And it's about understanding, okay, you live on a roller coaster. How best can I manage this? How can I slow it down? How can I be aware? And not beat myself down and think that because I fell back in an episode, I failed. It's just no, you didn't. You
Yeah.
did. It's part of your life. Management, yeah, is one thing, but being self-aware and being
Yes.
self-aware that like this does not define my healing and
Mm.
accepting that it is a real condition and it's part of your life.
Yes, exactly. Exactly that. It's just, so
Hard.
like you said, the acceptance part, right?
Acceptance, yeah.
And then to see it as a symptom, like if someone was bleeding or I have a friend with diabetes, they wouldn't be like shocked, "Oh, I had high
I
blood
know.
sugar," right? But
Yes.
right? I try to think of it with illnesses that are high maintenance like our
Right.
own, like that, and that really really helps me. I love
Right.
that. Yeah.
And when we don't, we just like, sorry, one more point.
No, tell me all the
It,
points.
oh yeah, okay. Don't tell me that. I'll hit too many points. But I think also a reason why it's hard for us is because we get such mixed signals, right? We're on social media, suddenly a psychologist posts about, how to heal, get rid of your bipolar. So people jump on that. They're in a depression. They're like, okay. Then we get told the other thing. Then we go to the doctor. They say, no, no, you got to be on meds. Then we go back on social media and it's like how to live a holistic life with. And so we're getting like all of
Oh,
these different ideas and messages that makes it hard for people with mental illness to accept it. That's why what you're doing, what I'm doing, what a lot of advocates are doing is so important, especially the ones living with mental illness. It's a completely different ball game.
yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's not textbook. I value lived experience so much. We need all of that, but that is, all the medical stuff has been very, very loud, and it's so important.
it's so
But
important.
the
But
lived I wanna hear from lived experience,
exactly.
right? I wanna hear, how other people I want me toos, right? I wanna
Yes,
say me
yes,
too,
yes,
right?
yes.
The
Love
power the power of it. I would love to go back to this time
okay.
of prom queen, of high school, of the falling apart. Tell me
Yeah.
what that looked like for you, and I'm assuming that this might have led up to your diagnosis.
Yes.
Wanna hear about
Yes.
that.
Oh, yes. Okay. So, I would say around, I was again, I was an athlete. I was very athletic. On the outside, it would appear as though I was doing all of the right things, that I was living the formula for someone who had a perfectly emotional, stable life. I had a good family. I was in high school. I was popular. I was, again, like the prom queen and stuff, and was an athlete. But my junior year, I'm going to say, things hit the fan, I'll say. Okay. I, the emotions began to become so overwhelming. The way I would describe it is I wanted to crawl out of my own skin. It felt like that. I still have those moments. That's the way I can describe it. Of I didn't know what the hell was going on, but I knew it wasn't normal. I began staying home from school.
Mm,
I couldn't get up a lot of days. Then I was sinking into something. I didn't know what it was. My parents didn't know. But this is when self harm became a big thing in my life, as far as an eating disorder, as far as other self harm,
mhm.
techniques. Not techniques, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, I know exactly.
Yeah, yeah. I don't, but and even, a part of self-harm is just completely hating yourself, right? And so that's how
Yeah.
I felt. In my book, I talk a lot about the fact about, like, there's this one short story narrative poem about, it's called Sink, and it's about the fact that when I was feeling this way, I
Mm,
would come home every day and then I would go to the bathroom, and everything was quiet. I could hear like my family on the outside, but I would sink into the bath, and just so I could be quiet in
mm.
my head, but I had to come back up again and like hit the surface. So it was very confusing. And it started to just kind of, boom, boom, boom. I got into college. I went to college, made tons of friends that I'm still friends with today. And again, I was at a school in Boston. I was an athlete, but things again were just not clicking. I don't want to say that I had like an addiction. I think I partied
Yeah,
alongside much as everyone else, so I don't want to say necessarily, because I don't have addiction problems, thankfully, but it was not good
yeah,
for me. It was also, it was suppressing something. And so, man, sophomore year, I came back and forth to college, dropping in and out. I mean, the story can get long, so I'm gonna try to get right to the issue. Was that sophomore year when I had gone back, things completely fell apart. I couldn't get out of bed. And to be honest with you, It's only been in the last couple of years that my friends have told me certain incidents that I literally do not remember. I had a
Wow.
breakdown. I guess I went to a therapist, an on campus. Uh,
Mhm.
I'm doing quotation marks. Uh,
Gotcha.
therapist, and when I told her what was going on, she scared me in the sense of she went, I'm going to call your parents, and kind of said, you need to be out of school. Well, that freaked me out. And so I think I guess I had like a breakdown. I went outside, I was crying, and all of these little things I didn't know about. And basically, long story short, or longer, my mom and brother showed up one day outside of my dorm.
Yeah.
My friends were there, they were all crying. I didn't say a word. I didn't know what the hell was going on. My mom put my stuff in the back and she said, you just get in the seat. Sorry, my friends dropped me off at a hotel. And I just walked in, I saw my brother there, and I just went, okay. They took me back home, and I was not doing well. And basically, kind of was abruptly when I went to a regular medical facility. There was a very untrained therapist, a doctor, and they actually took me involuntarily. I woke up in handcuffs, was sedated, and they took me in a cop car to a mental hospital, which it was the biggest blessing of my life because it's what led to where I am. I saw the injustices, but I was there, and that's where I got my diagnosis, which was shocking. But that mental hospital, that time was meant to happen. And
Mhm.
it's the like most spiritual way of like I can say of like that was meant to happen to me, even though it was horrifying at the same time.
Mm. Mhm.
That's where I got my diagnosis of bipolar 2.
Mm.
It's kind of how
Wow.
it started. It
Yeah,
took
I
scary.
love
Yeah,
that you brought up the thing about the hospital because I think and I wanna honor everyone's experience,
of
whether
course.
it be horrible or whatever, and I just want to remind everybody as we do, please take care of yourself. We talk about hard things. If you need to take breaks, if you need to take breaths, if this one is not for you, please do, because I want to get into, just I don't think we talk enough about how that actually felt like. And
Yeah.
so I love that you said that because sometimes that saves lives, right? There
Yeah.
isn't, sometimes there's no other option, right?
Right.
If you're going to find out. And as that sounds terrifying, and I'm
Right.
so sorry it had to happen that
Oh
way, but
no.
your perspective is really beautiful and powerful because I want to encourage people that if that's your only choice, like if you are, a harm to yourself or others, or you cannot get the help you need, it there's no shame in
Yeah.
going to the hospital, getting
No.
admitted. People probably had talked about this ad nauseum, but in Canada, there isn't an in between, and it's a year and a half to get into a psychiatrist. So
True.
basically, even though I wasn't at complete, um, well, like they were like, you're not sick enough to go to the psych ward, which I
Oh,
actually was like offended. I was like, I'm not even good enough, which
you're
is
like,
so
what the hell?
what, but I got to go to this side, like this, voluntary little treatment centers for them to
Oh
fiddle with
wow.
meds. Yeah, and I knew the psychiatrist there was good, and I knew that was a way to talk to a psychiatrist, but our only option here is to go to emergency.
Oh
And then
yeah.
there's always the fear of
Uh,
not knowing if you're going to get, admitted, but I tell people here in Canada, like, it's your only option, then, like, I could have waited another year and a half, or maybe I wouldn't be here.
right, exactly. Oh yeah. If you're having 100%, if you're at a point where you're having thoughts of harming yourself to the extent that you would no longer be here, suicidal thoughts. Okay, that's
Yeah.
what I'm
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I never know the correct terms. It's
Yeah,
society gets a little over the top with how to say it, but
yeah,
um, is go right there.
yeah,
Go right there.
yeah,
Then yeah, because that's a whole other thing of
yeah.
like the mental hospitals and the way that they're structured right now here. But of course, right now, Like, not unfortunately, but I hope we have more resources. But if you're ever having those kinds of thoughts, you just drive yourself there.
Yeah.
Just get dropped off.
Yeah, please tell someone. And I always think of, how it's shown in society. There's this one way of looking suicidal, and I had been introduced to this, and I would have told you 100% that I wasn't like that, and that I didn't have those until I heard of this concept of, a suicidal ideation, or having,
Yes.
like, I didn't have a plan, but I 100% wanted to go to sleep until I felt
Yes.
better. And if I
Uh,
didn't feel better, I just wanted to stay asleep. And that is,
uh,
I thought everybody would feel that way, but apparently
yeah.
apparently
I
not.
guess not. Yeah. I know
Right?
you like ask people, hey, have you guys ever had this? And they're like, no. And you're
Yeah,
like, oh, okay,
yeah,
never mind.
yeah, exactly, exactly. Well, and that must have been also hard for your family, right?
Oh
And
yeah.
sometimes families need to do those things to save us as well. So I love the way you talk about the both and, right? The
Yes.
terrible and beautiful.
That's
Um,
right.
yeah, I would
Mm.
love to hear a little bit about so you were brought because of more of a depression, like, that's where you were at when you went to the hospital? Is
Yeah, yeah. So my experience was I basically said that I was feeling very mentally unwell. I was with my mother at the time. And actually a little interesting, real quick short story that shows you the irony of it is that in the waiting room, this was a very small city. In the waiting room, actually there was a girl that knew me of me at from the high school, because there were like pictures of me like in a glass thing, because I had like as an athlete, and she was like, oh, are you Hannah? And like Bloom, and and it was crazy because she thought I was, completely like,
Yeah.
just not perfect, but that nothing would be wrong. And her dad began to notice that maybe I was there not because I was physically ill. Anyway, so that was like a little lobby moment that was very weird, and how we
Wow.
people from the outside. Anyway, what I had gone there was I wasn't feeling mentally well. Of course, my mom didn't know what to do, but we were under the impression that I was going to be able to get the resources or go to more of a private clinic where I
Yeah,
would have more control.
yeah.
However, one of the problems with the system is they do tend to throw people into the mental hospital when and the involuntarily, when it might not that I don't want to say it might not be necessary, but it's a big step. I mean, here's the bottom line: a judge had to give a court order. I was kind of arrested.
Oh
Um,
my goodness.
yeah, that's what people don't know about involuntarily being committed. Like, I don't have it on my record, but I do. I mean, I
Wow.
cannot get a gun, like, even if I wanted to, I don't.
Yeah,
But the fact is like it's a first right for Americans, not me, because of that. So going in being involuntarily committed is a huge thing, and they kind of didn't know what to do. And yeah, I think I honestly depressive. I was just exhausted. I was just
yeah,
exhausted and deplete. In many ways, I understand why I went, but I went to a hospital that was not all that, which is fine. However, it was the way in which it
yeah.
was done that
Yeah,
no person, nobody should ever have to experience. I mean, you're 19 years old, you wake up in handcuffs. I actually woke up and I thought I killed someone.
oh, friend.
No, I mean, yeah, no,
No,
but
that's so horrible. And
yeah,
okay, could there not be any other intervention to someone who's mentally
exactly.
unwell, and then you're going to put them through an
I
actual
know.
traumatic
I
experience to get
know.
better? Like, how does that even make
Right.
sense?
Right. And that's why there has to be this, again, it's just another part of my story that like I'm
Yeah,
trying to move like justice towards, because come on, like nobody should have to be taken in that manner. I mean, come on.
yeah,
I was
yeah.
19. I was a
Years old.
teenager. And
Yeah.
so making a people aware you don't, I think people have this idea that you have to be completely suicidal or you have to have hurt somebody to be put in a mental hospital when that isn't necessarily true
Yeah.
all the time. However, again, it is sometimes the only option.
Yeah.
So you're
Yeah.
gonna
It's like
that's
the worst, like, 2
yeah,
worst things,
right.
and I did not know that I, like, pictured it like, the show Intervention, where they all talk to you, and then, like, I'm not,
No.
maybe I'm naive that way, I didn't
Well,
know.
no, you're not naive. People don't say it.
Yeah,
It's very there's a very quiet thing. Even I've had this conversations with other activists that like in the community that have businesses and like all of these big things, they've lived their life around activism. We've had the discussion about it's a tricky line. Now I'm willing to push the line, but it's a tricky line because you're kind of calling out a system,
yeah,
right? But no, it's not like intervention. I mean, I was told that I did not know that I had already been taken out of the custody. I was in the custody of the state. They had gotten a judge's order to put me under the custody of the state. So I know people listening are like, what the hell is that? Basically, that's what they do with somebody who's been convicted of a crime. I was 19. They didn't have the right. I'm in the custody of myself. They got the state to take custody of me, meaning you can do whatever you want. No lawyer could come in. My parents couldn't stop it. It's like you committed a crime. It's like you
wow,
committed.
and that just shows you, gives that message of what people think about people that live
My
with mental,
gosh, right?
like, that
We
we're
existed.
criminals, right? And then it's like,
How could you not? How could you not
wow.
feel like a criminal?
I know, and
Yeah.
just how it's treated, like, surely there are, and I'm hoping that it's coming, more things are coming. I am actually curious about your thoughts on the, we just got in Canada, and I know you all got it before us, but the 988, what do you think about that? And what do you
Okay.
like, I don't know anybody that's, yeah, I'm curious about what you think about it.
Okay, well, this will be an interesting conversation because I actually want to hear what you think. I'm going to
Okay,
give like a little bit
okay,
of a different side of it.
I do
Of,
wanna hear.
of course, I think it's fantastic. I think it's wonderful. And first, before anything, I applaud the people that work, the advocates that work to get that, because it's easy for me to give my opinion. These people work, they actually change something like
Yeah,
huge,
yeah,
right? So I want to applaud them. And of course, it's easier, it's more accessible, it's memorable, and it is definitely going to save lives. Okay. So I want to make that clear. However,
mm,
in my time in advocacy, being on the ground, talking to tens of thousands of families, people, suicide, all of that, getting to know it, and just listening to those stories, we never look at the underlying problem
yeah,
of where do we put the money though
yeah,
toward getting people not to that point? Because here's a truth that a lot of people don't want to say.
mm,
A lot of people that are going and at that mentality that their life no longer matters and they want to stop the pain, majority unfortunately follow through.
yeah,
They aren't even in the mindset of
yeah,
calling for help because they don't want it.
yeah,
Don't want it. They're ready.
yeah.
They're ready. And
Or
so
they
my
don't think they deserve it because our
no,
brains
they don't think
lie.
they deserve it. They're in a
Yeah,
blackout
yeah,
mode. And let's put it this way. I've talked to thousands of people who have been suicidal. Some people, I mean, ridiculous amount, but I've talked to families of those people who have lost suicide. I've also talked to people who have tried and it
yeah,
backfired.
yeah,
And the thing that I have learned from those stories just was that I want to, let me think. Actually, you know what, for editing purposes, because I don't want to
Yeah,
distract, like this part, I was thinking something and then I'm like, well, if I can't articulate it well, then I won't. But
sure.
here, I'll get back to it. That I think it's great, but I think
Mhm.
in society we have a problem of changing the number. But
Yeah.
how do we get the people to even press the buttons? You know, look,
Yes.
the bottom line is suicide is not going down as much as people want to believe. It's not. I look at the statistics constantly. I'm always researching
Yeah.
because we're not putting the money toward. I don't want to get, I want to get people, of course, always having that line established
Yeah.
for a thing. But it's when a person gets to that point and we're relying on a number to
Yeah.
save their life,
Yeah.
that's a big responsibility that I don't think any number,
Yeah.
any easy. I think if you could press one number, it's still not acknowledging the
Yeah.
underlying issue.
Yep. And it's like, if we could save ourselves, then do you know what I mean? It's like putting the onus
Right,
on saving the selves.
right.
The only thing that I'm hopeful about, and I don't know
Oh,
much. I'm
no, no, you
hopeful.
should be hopeful. It's fantastic. I want to hear it.
Yeah, yeah, I hope, but I don't know, but like what you said, like, the amount of money that probably went into that, like,
Yeah,
we're not thinking about allocating, right? We have this
yeah,
number, but then you're telling me I can't get into a psychiatrist for a year and a half.
exactly.
Why are we not fixing that, right?
Right.
So I hear you. My hope is that it will be like, can other people call, like, so that what I've heard is that maybe other people can call, so that the you don't have to call 911, and the police that don't have mental health first aid training, that they end up arresting or demonizing these people that actually could be taught,
Yes.
in a psychotic break and actually need help, and not criminals, right?
Right,
So I
right.
don't know if that's a thing, but
Well, I don't, is that what the 933? I think it's just a hotline.
oh, okay, that's good to know because it's
Wait,
brand new in Canada, so I didn't know
okay.
that much about it, but I feel really strongly, and I wanna take it, like, just to know about mental health first aid and how much are our police or even, like, doctors and nurses. I mean, I still go to my doctor, he's really great at a lot of things. He put back my diagnosis probably, like, 5 years because I went in with it all, and he would just said,
Yeah,
"No, nope, that's not you."
yeah,
And
right.
so you're right, like, money going into that train, like, if cops are what are showing up to these different episodes, or someone that's clearly in mental distress and not,
Yeah,
like, hurting anybody but needs help, and they're
yes,
showing up with fair enough, they've only been trained, like, for
right.
criminals. Anyways, I wanna hear
Oh,
more of
well,
your
can I
story, but
tell
I was
you?
so curious.
No, and on that, because one area I study is police, like in the policing of it. And so when
Okay.
the whole, like Black Lives Obviously Matters movement happened, which I know everybody has different opinions, but I'm not even talking about that aspect of it. Um, the thing about it is I actually created a list and took a list off of a database that had every incident of individuals that had had a fatality with an interaction with the cops. And I was able to categorize it black, white, ages, girls, and women. And to be honest with you, actually, it's white. It's not what you would think. The statistics go down majorly if you have a mental illness, whether you're white or black, even if you're a female, right? Like I I want to be careful with the statistic, but when I was doing it, it was like 1 in 4 women with mental illness have a fatal interaction. But here's the thing with black men, the highest subgroup, you have the general black men, African American men who have their violence. So the general umbrella. The first group that is gets the most is Black African American men with mental illness. It's 1 in 2.
Oh,
1 in 2. So when I looked at the Black Lives Matters list, because I had studied like a crazy person all of these names, I remember I was at the grocery store and I saw the names, the shirts I'm talking about, right? With
yeah,
all the a
yeah,
bunch of
yeah.
names on the back. And I remember tracing my finger and I was going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, up to 20. And it's because all 20 of those people, I know for a fact, they had mental illness. It was a mental breakdown that happened.
Wow.
It was like 20% of that. So it goes back to your point of like the policing. That's a pretty high statistic. That's a pretty high statistic. So as it goes to the hotlines and all of that, I think we also have to think about, where are we putting the funds here? Where are we putting
Yeah,
the people? Police need to be trained more than anything. Look, if they learn how to deal with people with a mental breakdown, they're going to have more of an open mind when it comes to minorities, period, right? Because
yes,
it will open you up. You'll have to deal with people who are of a minority, and white people. I don't want to kick them out of the conversation because they have mental breakdowns. They also get killed as well when they have mental illness. So it goes back to, I like always giving just a different idea when you
yeah,
ask the 933, because of course, number one, if you're ever in need of help, you call the number. You never doubt
yes,
yourself.
yeah.
I'm just giving another side of it.
Yeah, no, and that's why I was so curious because I know that you understand and look at these things so differently. And I think that it just comments on and trickles down and affects all of us that have, especially
Yeah.
when I remember when I heard the term like the bipolar is a serious or what was severe, that word, severe mental illness, and there was the
Oh,
group, right? And I was just like, uh,
nobody wants that.
yeah, right? I was like,
Yeah.
"Can we come up with better language, please,
Nobody
somebody?"
wants
And I
that.
could go all off on the language thing. Oh my goodness, I feel like I
Oh,
want to
forget it.
talk to you forever. I wanna go back to that time, and I want to for people that so you were diagnosed. I want to go back into that time in
Yes.
the in if you're willing,
Yes.
in the mental
Oh,
hospital
yeah.
and your experience there and your experience getting diagnosed, because one of the biggest questions that people ask of other people and are really interested in the podcast is how did they get the diagnosis, right? And what that
Yep.
looked like, and then what it was like for you after, because sometimes it seems like
Right.
it's going to be this magic
Oh,
fixing
yeah.
or it's gonna ruin your life, and so I would love for you to talk
Oh,
to
yeah.
that.
Yes, yes. Okay. So I'm like a storyteller, so I'll frame it in the like way,
Yes.
that whole when I was diagnosed. I remember the doctors called me in and I was sitting at a table with all of them, and I had been in the hospital for a couple of days. And the main doctor said to me, like, after all of these different sessions, we've concluded that you definitely have bipolar II disorder. And the first words that came, I swear, I think it was even before he finished saying the diagnosis, I said, no, 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 I don't. And he was like, Hannah, we've done a lot of like, I know this might be, and I just kept shaking. And I said, no, that's not true. And I remember when they let me out, I went back to the bathroom and I looked at myself in the mirror, and it was like I was looking for, I thought I was delusional because I had known what I knew about mental illness. The stigma that I had was, I thought people with bipolar disorder were crazy monsters, that if you were in
Yeah,
a room with them alone and you pissed them off, they were going to kill you. Okay.
yeah,
That's honestly
yeah,
what at that time I thought. So I'm looking and I know I'm empathetic. I know that I'm kind. These are things in my heart that I know for sure about me. I would never harm a fly. Of course I defend myself, but I would, and so I'm looking and I'm like, there's no way. There's no way that could be me. I don't fit that image. So it took a long time for me to accept it.
Mhm.
Didn't really accept it in the hospital. I mean, you're in a hospital, so you're just
Yeah.
going with it. But I think the big thing is when I came out, yeah, it was a major process. I knew I had, and that gets into another area, but feeling this sense of almost inspiration because I felt like there was a fire ignited. My purpose slowly started developing. But as far as me really accepting bipolar, going on and off medications, that
Yeah.
that took a very long time. Remember, for everybody out there, right? And I think you can probably also speak to this, because I don't want people to get nervous. Oh, shoot, I get a diagnosis. Is that going to be my journey? You've got to remember there was nothing on social media about this at this time. Like
Yep.
when I'm telling you the resources and the advocacy that's online right now, it's unbelievable. There were not blogs. There were maybe one or two, and I can name those people. I know them. I'm friends with them that wrote this. So the thing is that there was nothing there. And so, what do you hold on to? I didn't know who to look at. That's why I started reading about Marilyn Monroe and Carrie Fisher and them, because
Mhm.
they were celebrities that were decently, I wrote an article about Marilyn Monroe because she borderline had schizophrenia pretty much. And
Mm.
that's how I began to like actually kind of empower myself, was
Yeah.
seeing successful people with it and eventually accepted it. But that came with empowerment. That came with
Yeah.
empowerment. That came with research. That came with me stepping into an area where I became more of like absorbing knowledge, seeing where stigma came from, and then finally being able to accept my diagnosis. But no way, no way. In
Yeah.
the beginning, I was like, this is a lie. Those doctors are crackpots.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's so interesting. I because I was diagnosed so late in life, like I was 32, right? I had the both and. I was desperate for an answer and it was super freeing to finally they say like, to me it was like this is
Right.
not a personality flaw. You are not
Yeah.
all of this is who you are. And then
Well,
also I don't want to be that. I couldn't find anybody online that like you said it was all portrayed as this horrible um
awful.
criminal or whatever, and I was like, "Well, I have 2 young kids, and I actually think I'm a fairly decent mom, and I'm this
Yeah.
and that," but I have and of course, bipolar 2 is way less known as well, right?
Yes,
'Cause that's what my
yes.
doctor said to me, like, "You wouldn't be a mom or have a degree if you had bipolar disorder," and I was like, "Oh, okay. Well,
Yeah, yeah,
and then
yeah.
it must just be my fault."
Right, right. I must be flawed as a
Right?
person, as a human. That, which is
Yeah.
an awful feeling.
It is, it really is, and I love and I applaud you for being out there, and I'm curious about what you think about this. It's just kind of a half-formed thought I have, but I've been thinking lately, like, I am so like you, not as long, but immersed in I'm talking to advocates all the time. I'm talking about bipolar online. I'm like, "Oh, it's getting normalized, it's getting" but I have a circle, right? And then sometimes I go out into the what I call, like, the outside world of
Yes, yes.
and I think we're so far ahead, and then it that makes me realize that a lot like, we're not. We are and we're
Oh,
not.
yeah. Yeah, you're not crazy for thinking that. We're not. We're not. We're not. I'm very open about the fact, like when I see things on TV that are like mental health, Michael Phelps is swimming in a pool, and people think because celebrities are talking about it now, mental health, that is not true.
Yeah.
That is, unfortunately, yeah, are we in a different place? Yeah, but I'll tell you that we promote the idea that we're in a much better place. I know exactly. It doesn't matter how long you've been in it. You can be in it for 2 days
Yeah.
and see the way that people still perceive it. Yes, it has gotten better.
Yeah.
Better from what? Better from people thinking every person, I guess, with bipolar is a mass murderer.
Yeah.
So we're not at, like, you're talking about coming from the one of the most, if not the most stigmatized unfairly group of individuals, because that is exactly what we are.
Yeah, yeah. And I think about, so I just asked this question on Instagram about sharing, and like sharing your diagnosis, and also what, do you feel comfortable sharing, and what does stigma look like to you? Kind of big questions. And I could, like, I sobbed at the answers. I was expecting people to, to have hard things, but
Yeah,
some people that literally felt completely muzzled because they would lose their jobs. They would,
that's
and
right.
I knew these things to be true, but just the fact that they have zero freedom to feel like they even could tell someone, tell if they wanted to. And I was just like, because I recognize also that, that I, even within that community, like I have a lot of privilege, like I'm a white
Yeah,
woman, middle class, like
yeah,
people
yeah,
listen, right? But
yeah.
having a little bit of an ear. I mean, I'm still no, but I was just heartbroken, and I was just thinking about, it just seems like such an uphill hill battle, and I'm curious about what kinds of things, and this is going to be a big question, so tell me if it's too much, but what kinds of things do you think needs to happen, like on the ground, right? And like we talked a bit about systems already, to help with this, because I say things like, sharing our stories, even if it's to one person, but if it's not safe, you can't share your story.
No, you can't.
So then it it's all on the advocates. Like, I am a teacher on call, so I don't have a home base.
Oh, okay.
So I don't have to tell, like, I don't have to tell
Right.
anyone, but I don't have to tell a principal. I don't have to talk about it a lot at
Yes.
work, right? Until I have to really think about it if I tell someone
Right.
that I have a podcast, because the title pretty much says it all. And I
Right.
think we've come far in talking about mental health, and we talk about depression and anxiety, but what we
Not
talk
mental illness, though.
no, and we don't talk about when it's messy. It's like we wanna be like, "Oh, when you're sad," or da da. We
Yeah.
don't wanna say when you're in psychosis, when you can't brush your teeth,
Yeah.
when you're
Yeah.
so high. I know people that are like, church ladies with like these deep values, or and then you
Yeah.
hear that they have a full-on manic episode and maybe
Yes.
get the hypersexuality, which is a symptom, right? Like
Yes.
actual
Yes.
symptom. And I'm totally going off, but I'm
No,
curious about
no. You,
some things that you think that, just that we could do. And I tend to do this, and I'm slightly hypomanic right
yeah.
now, so I start to think about, it's all overwhelming, and like,
A
m-
lot.
it's a drop in the ocean. What I'm doing doesn't even matter, and I know all these things not to be true, and I can reframe them, but I just sometimes feel overwhelmed, and I'm
It
wondering,
is overwhelming.
yeah, one, do you feel overwhelmed working in all of that? And
Yeah.
two, what are some things that we can do, whether it be folks with bipolar, but there's too much onus on that. What can we do, people that don't have bipolar? And, how do we
Yes.
get that attention? And how do we help
Yes.
people that love someone with bipolar, like advocate for us?
Yes. Oh,
Yeah.
I love
Am I
this
making
question.
sense?
Oh, actually, I love this question, and
Okay.
there's so many things to dive into with it. And I think it's an awesome question that I actually really want to explore.
Yeah.
So like as far as overwhelm, actually right now I'm definitely experiencing overwhelm. I called my mom this morning. I'm like, I got the book out and stuff, but I have to get back to activism. It's too much. And I'm definitely overwhelmed with the activism side of it in the sense of what I am trying to do, more so of writing as a journalist and exposing different things, that there's so many problems that it's become overwhelming. So that area right now, I feel a lot of overwhelm. I get nervous. Am I going to be able to do this? But again, these are thoughts you're aware of. Okay. As far as on the ground and everything, I mean, this is what I'm doing now, of where I think we are completely missing it. The Whether you want to acknowledge it or not, there is a hierarchy in the mental health system, and psychologists and doctors who are wonderful, and we need them, and therapists, they're fantastic, but historically they have been the ones on top. They're the ones that are speaking at the table. They're the ones that are getting invited on news things to talk about what we do with mental illness in a more professional way, right? When
Yep.
people with mental illness get asked to do anything, it's like in the media world of like, not just like with, obviously we're going to talk about like bipolar and sharing our stories here, but when they get invited for Mental Health Awareness Month, it's all about sharing your story. You're like a guinea pig,
Yeah.
not a guinea pig, but you're like an object that just, you're so brave, for
Yeah.
telling your story. And it's like a pat on the head. And I'm
Yeah.
thinking to myself, we have so much more to say,
Yeah.
but people don't want us to say it. Okay. They don't. And what I'm getting to is, first of all, the reason I wrote my book has so many different chapters. It talks about so many different themes. It talks about love, it talks about politics, it talks about sensuality and all of that, and mending and madness and everything. And the reason why I did that, and a lot of publishers said, you've got to take the things out, the poetry and essays and stories about mental illness out and save that for another book. And I said, no. And that's why I didn't go with a publishing company, because I said, I want the general public to read this book and be confronted with mental illness, like being and reading the poetry and hopefully letting it spark curiosity. Because what needs to be done, what I am hoping, what I've been gearing up for 10 years, that I'm nervous about, that I've been working with different groups on, is people have to understand on the ground the history of mental illness and the injustices that have occurred and occur today. Because we've had always the finger pointed at us. We've been the platform for blame. Where is there room for us to empower ourselves? Where is there room? I mean, you're still not seeing, we're treated like incapable individuals. A lot of these grassroots organizations, they're great, but they were started by caretakers. They were not started by people with mental illness. So we've kind of always been not having our own voice to be like, y'all want to think we're crazy? Cool. But we're moving ahead because there's things going on and being very powerful in the leaders of the movement. Because the bottom line is, when people begin to hear what has been done historically to the time being, they will have to acknowledge it. They will have to listen to me. They will have to, because now you're pointing the finger at the institution and
Yeah.
they're going to have to speak to it. And what if I'm giving examples and stuff like that? And why understanding, and the next thing I'm trying to create is like, not a textbook, but an empowerment way of being able to easily, in an engaging and fascinating way, get people with mental illness to understand the history. When you understand the history, you will understand that you have been told a lie about yourself. Because like the way I explain it, well, here's what we'll go into. Let me give you an example, okay?
Yeah.
Okay. One of the biggest parts of history that's, again, this is fascinating and very tragic. In 1247, again, there's a poem about it. It's called Bedlam in my book. 1247, Bedlam Hospital in England, one of the first to begin basically to have people with mental illness come there. I'm getting all this information from a book that we can source. It's called Bedlam in the Mental Health America Crisis. It's unbelievable. They started to bring people in. Now, this is 1247, okay, with mental illness. To fund the city of Bedlam, because it was in a town, some people actually, maybe it's Bethlehem, but they call it both. To fund the nurses, to fund the city, the mental Bedlam became an attraction site. And you could pay a fee, people in the town, to see and go through and watch the people chained below. And this is serious. This is a fact. This is not a conspiracy. This is not, again, we can source it. And there are these historians that talk about how the fact that people had fetishes for madness, and they would pay a fee to look at the people with mental illness. Okay, so why is that important? Well, because if you learn that as a person with mental illness, you're like, wait, I'm insane. You're calling me insane. We're kind of like a culture because we've been outcasted so much that I call it our history.
Wow.
You're empowered when you hear that because you're starting to say to yourself, oh, wait a minute. This is not what I've been told is not true. This has been calculated. Stigma has been structured, and starting there, that we have literally been used as attractions in the past, where people and society looked at us and paid fees to watch us in cages. Okay, so then you start to say maybe you're insane. Like the conversation flips,
Yeah.
and it's like, oh, it's reflecting back on them. And then the bottom line is where it leads up to right now is that I realize, like, here's the thing: when someone's hiding, when someone lies to you, the question you always have to ask is why. And the reason why is because they're hiding something. We
Mm.
have been lied to about our identity, the label that we wear. It has been completely structured to keep us down in many ways. Well, when you're a person with bipolar on the ground and you learn that, you will become more empowered. It will ignite a fire in you. When I expose things about the fact that kids as young as 7 years old are being abused and sexually assaulted, again, this is a fact. These are not conspiracies. We can source this in hospitals. I mean, yesterday, a psychiatrist in Virginia got off. He sexually assaulted all of these girls, but there was something in the evidence, and he was found not guilty. So, like, all of these things, you're going to begin to see break that. You're going to become impassioned to be the leader of a movement that only we can be the leaders of, because we have to speak up for our people. And when we talk about it like that, when we talk about the injustices, when we refer to it as our culture, because it is
Ah,
culture of all of that, that's what needs to be done, because empowerment is the first route to everything else. We need to be invited to the table. I don't want to share my story as much as I want to share the fact that a hospital got shut down recently because they found so many instances of assault that the staff burned the records and smashed the videotapes. That's what I want to talk about.
yeah.
And so that alone is going to build more of a community, and it's going to empower individuals to say, okay, I'm not crazy, and we're going to go after this together. We've got
Yeah.
to take control back into our own hands. And I know that was like a huge way of explaining it, but if you're
Yeah.
asked what needs to be done, that is what needs to be done. We can get all day on stages and tell our story, or we
Yeah.
can get up there and really empower the people and say, look, forget about the stigma, forget about it. Okay, let's talk about our history. Let's learn this. You're going to see that it's a lie. You're going to be empowered to go after it and to stick up. The bottom line is stigma is a short, sugar-coated word for discrimination.
Yeah.
Yeah, when people get on me, people will get on me about romanticizing mental illness. I
Yeah.
do in many ways. The reason why I don't have a problem with it at all, and the answer I always have for people is, you can get a job if people think you're creative, even if you're not. I'm just trying to get people in the door. You're
Yeah.
not going to get a job if they think you're a mass shooter. And
Yeah.
that's,
Fair. Yeah. Yeah.
sorry,
That's
I went
so
on
true.
huge.
No, you speak my language. No, that's nobody. It's such a hard line too, because it depends. It goes back to what we were talking about the like the faces or the people out there. It depends also how you're doing, how much you can be involved in that,
Contribute.
right? And so it's like you have to. try to keep yourself well, and that's
Yes.
why I think that there's so many lanes, and I love that you know that this is your lane, but also I love how you're inviting those of us that have the
Yeah.
capacity to come along with that. I love that.
We
I
all
love
play
that
our
so
own
much.
roles.
Yeah,
That's what I say in the advocacy. I mean, there's about like I call them a crew of like 8 of us. We've known each other for 10 years of advocates because we were the first ones out to talk about mental illness. It's kind of funny when we're all together. But anyway, the reason why I'm saying it, I think a lot of us is seen as our development and whatever we're doing. Every single advocate, including yourself, we are all playing a different role. Some of that is sharing story. I personally am not as passionate as
yeah,
just sharing my story now, but that's nothing to do except we're all playing our different
yeah,
roles that all make the same impact that will all bring us up together. If we're all doing the same thing,
yeah,
saying the same things, answering the questions the same way,
yeah,
we're going to get far.
yeah. People will actually listen because I think about how could I use my platform that will get us somewhere that people can feel like they could even tell, like some people feel like they can't even tell a friend, let alone a boss,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
It's just,
Well, it's
and then
true.
you talk about how it was treated and how people, it was like something to watch, something that's interesting
Interesting.
or right? Or dramatic or something, and
Yeah,
we can see that even today, like,
of course.
in the movies that are being made. Every time there's a show, I can see the buildup and I'm like, "Oh, there goes the really eccentric mother that
Yes.
loves to paint, that runs off with a dude and is horrible to her children." I'm like, "I
When
don't
I
paint
even
and I don't."
can I tell you? I almost think I know what show you're talking about.
Right?
You
There's
it's oh, don't get me started. What's interesting though is people are like I call it, and when I say madness, it's because I try to take these terms and flip them
Yep.
of saying, so that's why madness is a part of like what I'm doing. But the thing is people are addicted to it. Look, we love shows like Euphoria for 13 reasons why. So when people have this whole thing about, oh, mental illness is this, I'm like, historically, people have been obsessed with mental illness and this idea of madness and eccentricity, however you develop it, they have. And society just doesn't want to admit that.
Yeah, that's so true. That is really, really true. That is really powerful. And I love what you said because I'd love to talk about the book more. I love what you said
Oh, yeah.
about how you wouldn't take out those parts. And it's
No,
true. It's like it has to be separate because
one
we
or the
cannot be
other.
seen as a whole person. And
No,
guess who's buying the books is the
exactly.
ones of us that that already live with bipolar disorder. And then
Right,
it's like, but we
right.
want others, like, I want other
Yes.
people to hear it, like, people are like, "Oh, I remember even a friend, and I love her, but I remember I was so disheartened," and we talked about it, and it's fine. If you're listening, I love you. But was saying, "Well, I would love to listen to your podcast. I don't have bipolar disorder."
Oh,
And I'm like,
yeah.
"Then you 100% needs to listen to the podcast."
Right,
Right?
right.
Like, to hear the stories, and it's a hard line. I'm like, I
Oh,
wanna
yeah.
share stories because that's what I'm passionate about.
Right.
But also, I want people don't see that as education. People don't see that, like you said, the hierarchy of, say,
Yeah.
psychiatry. They'll go straight to, academia,
Oh,
and
they
they
want
don't.
the psychologist's new book, like, out there, I'm not talking about a specific one, I'm talking about, like, most of them, that's
Yeah,
who sells the books, but,
yeah, yeah, and
um,
it's not that they're not important, but it's like, pass the mic.
that's the biggest thing, like, when you talk about what needs to be done on the ground, it's like, pass the mic, the only thing is they ain't gonna pass it unless we start going after them,
Yeah,
going
and
after
if you're well, and if oh, you got me all excited, like, sometimes that voice that lies to me, that is bipolar disorder, it tells me that I take up too much space. And in fact, uh, I
not enough.
it is okay to demand space for other people, for our
Absolutely.
people. Like, if I am well enough to do this and I'm a naturally loud
Yeah.
person, I'm going to do that. And I think that I've been afraid to say those things. So this has been a aha moment for me. And I thank
Oh,
you.
yeah. Oh, don't ever look what other people want to perceive about what you're doing. That's their problem. And
I
also, look,
know.
it's trying to pull you and put you down again. No, I don't even, whatever people, I'll take up as much space as I possibly can because I know what direction I'm going in. I know I'm confident in it. And,
Yeah.
there's space for everybody, but I'm not going to diminish what
Yeah.
I'm trying to do to appease people. I don't even know.
Yeah. Well, and sometimes I think that and I love that you're in that space, but I think that in some of the space with the smaller advocacy, um, it's like
Yeah, what is it like?
you want to be palatable.
Ooh, what's can you
So
explain
you
that a little
want to
more?
be, I feel like sometimes I need to ride the line that I don't know, like that. uh, Trying to think about how I say like, I don't want to I think that sometimes if I'm my whole big self and my whole, like, awesome, beautiful, messy, eccentric self, that I'm gonna play into. A lot of people just put me in the, "Oh, well, she's bipolar." Like, that's her hypomania speaking, or she's like, "Don't take me seriously." So I'm like, I feel like I
Oh,
have to be careful, right? To be,
I see.
do you know what I mean? Not show and tell, like, some of the really gritty things, and that's what I try and focus on. Like, a lot of the gritty things about bipolar
Yeah.
disorder are uncomfortable for people. Think about how uncomfortable it is for us.
Yeah, exactly, exactly, and yeah, exactly, and what it's never what it not look, people have the right to feel uncomfortable, people have the right to be upset, they have the right to be mad. We have the right to keep doing what we want to do. We have the right to share our story. We have the right to help other people. Like people are allowed to think that we are also allowed to continue what we're doing and speak with what we believe will be the change. So that's how I think as you're doing, always be transparent. I mean, you see me, I don't, I'm pretty transparent, and some people, especially people like in the mental, I mean, there's some therapists and psychologists that are not happy with me about some of the things that have come up, but I don't care for them. I'm not fighting for them. I'm fighting for people with mental illness. And so that's why.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah, and that's
You're
saving
doing
lives.
incredible. This is
Oh,
great.
thank
Helping so
you.
you're not taking up enough space and always transparent. People want to hear your voice and people want to hear what you have to say regardless. It's the truth, you
Yeah,
know.
thank you for saying that. Yeah, I have new energy. I can feel it
Oh
inside, and that's
yeah.
exciting. Sometimes people see people like us, and especially people, like you, that can just speak so, and like, so give so much empowerment. Sometimes they look at us and think, "Well, I could never be like that," or
Of course.
I'm not someone." Do you know what I mean? Like, they put
Oh
it
yeah,
in
yeah.
a different category, and so I would
Yeah.
love, and then they think, "Oh, well," then it feeds into the, "Well, they're better," right? Like, they're not better as in better human beings, but
Right.
they're uh, like, healed. People use
Yeah.
that word,
Yeah.
or, people,
Yeah.
all of those kind of words. So I would love for, I try to remind people that I struggle too, and I'm curious, how does, bipolar disorder show up in your everyday life?
Ooh, what a great question. You've got great questions that like are different from other things that I do. Okay. This is no, it's a great question. How does geez, it's interesting because it does show up. Um, it shows up in my life in very different ways, right? It can show up in my life, I think, every day consistently, in an artistic way. Okay.
Mhm.
So creating wise every day, writing or something like that. Yeah, pretty much on a daily basis, feeling those emotions, everything. How does it show up in my daily life? It's interesting because it's always there. So I sometimes I think I don't separate anymore bipolar from me. And I know a lot of people say, no, it's a condition, you're not defined by it. A lot of people say that. something I don't really like. You're
Mm.
not defined by your mental illness. And it's like, no, I'm not, but it's a significant, extremely significant part of me. And by the way, if I'm not defined by it, then why is it you can't get a job if you're open about bipolar? So it does define you in many ways, according to
Interesting. Yeah.
right. Yeah. People, yeah, it's not a huge like thing because again, the empowerment comes with saying this is a part of me. Like, okay, you can believe what you want, but that's here. So the thing is that it's a consistent flow. Bipolar shows up in my life. I mean, okay, I'll tell you about this morning. This morning, I woke up. I even questioned myself if I could do this podcast. Like, this is good for people to know because you're seeing me now. You're like, what? This morning I woke up and I said, "Oh no, it's one of like those I've been feeling such intense anger." Um
Mm.
and there's been a couple of things that have happened recently that have been kind of like triggers and I woke up and I was angry.
Yeah.
Um and I was like, I was just like slamming my hands on, and these are things we're afraid to say because we're like, oh, does
Yes.
it look
Yeah.
crazy? I slammed my hands down on the thing, but I've learned a regulation technique. So I felt like I was crawling out of my skin. I called my mom. I was crying. I'm a loser. I'm a failure. And
Yeah.
started sinking into a rabbit hole like Alice
Yeah.
in Wonderland. That was this morning,
Yeah.
but I now because I can regulate as long as I'm self-aware and I say there will be times, okay, like I tossed a book recently, like we'll say, at my wall. Now, a lot of people would say, "Oh, you can't do that," but I actually learned in therapy that sometimes, you didn't do anything to yourself. Okay, you have to have a little bit of space to be
Yeah.
like, oh, and so as far as what you asked, showing up daily in my life, I mean, the art shows up there, but I am on a roller coaster and I am well medicated. However, have accepted it's a daily part
Yeah.
of my life. I go in and out and tomorrow I don't know. But
Right. Yeah.
acceptance is huge and
Yes.
having my community and having art as a coping. So it shows up daily. It shows up daily. My emotions are always there. They're always sneaking around. And some days I can't even get out of bed. I'm so numb. I don't feel anything. And I'm dealing with a lot of these things right now.
Yeah.
So people think they see no.
Yeah.
No. I'm yeah.
That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that.
Oh
That
yeah, of course.
I find that stuff that truth so inspiring because showing up in spite of that and using like, I think we're afraid to talk about anger, right? In society, especially as women, right? We're not supposed to be angry. We're supposed to make everyone comfortable. Um, I think that a lot of the anger fuels us to do beautiful things and or I
Destruction.
I end up being the I don't mean to take up leadership, but I end up being the leader in things. Like a lot of people feel something but I feel like that is fueled by the righteous anger, by
Yes.
which actually behind my anger, if I pull it apart and look behind it, it's actually like deep, deep sadness about the state of things or deep
Yeah.
compassion for other people. And it's like you said, like it's befriending. So I've posted it's not you're not your disorder, right? And I
Yes.
think that for me, there's a couple ways to look at it. I have to look at it a little bit outside of me to be able to understand and accept that I have the illness. But I spent too many years trying to pull apart what is Shaley, what is bipolar, what is
Yes.
and it got me stuck, right?
Yes.
Whereas it's I have an illness, but it's also a part of me and I need to work
Yes.
alongside it and with it. And that may not look like what I thought it
Mm.
was going to look like. But it is what it is. And when I could let that go, I am in a healthier place because we have the double whammy. You have the illness, and then you have the covering up the illness, and then
Oh,
just not
me.
accepting it, right? Like that whole idea I always say I try and be really gentle about it in the beginning, but later, like this idea of when am I going to get off my, I'm very pro meds. When
Yeah.
am I going to get off my meds, or when this arriving thing, or when is it going
Yes.
to go away? And I would be like, I thought that being better or managing meant that I wasn't going to experience things anymore. I wasn't
Oh,
going to,
geez.
or I would be able to use all my coping mechanisms
Oh,
naturally. It
yeah.
would just come to me. And it is not so. But like you said, the acceptance, as hard as it it was my step forward.
Of course. Oh, it's well, it is it is literally what it's almost like a cloud opening to finally give you some sort of direction. It's before meds, it's before everything. You have to accept it to even like in many ways, like acceptance is such a huge part. And I think that it's awesome that you have posted, and that's why conversations like this are so
Yeah.
important. You're saying I am not my disorder. And of course, me sharing that side and you sharing that side, the thing that's
Yeah.
great
So
about
good.
that. Oh, yeah, because what you're saying is exactly that is an absolute truth. And people that are going to go, well, that doesn't work for me, thinking that it's part of me isn't. Now they hear, okay, this is a way to look outside of it. That's why having these conversations around it is
Yeah.
so important, and the different because I totally see that perspective, and I think that it's awesome that you're open about that because
Yeah.
it's helping a lot of people. Because
Well, and
work.
yeah, yeah, and we're not a monolith, right? And that's why it's interesting, because I get pushback from some of our people, like, because I like person first language, but some people are like, I don't care about that. I identify better if I say I am bipolar. And whereas I identify
Right.
more with saying I have, but guess what? We all live with it, so we can pick
Yeah,
how we
we
want to
decide,
say
right,
things, right?
right,
And I
right.
remember I really learned something from that, because I kind of felt like everyone felt the same, and I was like, "Oh, okay, yeah."
Oh,
So
yeah.
now I
Oh,
try
yeah.
to say for me, right? Because I don't wanna speak for everyone. We're not a group. We're not a
Right.
monolith. We're,
That's right.
different people within that have similar symptoms that show up
Yes.
similar ways. So this has been so inspiring and challenging, and, yes, I thank you. Thank
Of
you,
course. Thank
and
you.
I wanna be best friends, so
We are.
expect me to show up in your life somehow. Before we end this, I do wanna talk about your book. I wanna
Okay.
talk about it so much, because I want everyone, like, to start the car and buy the book. Press the button and buy the book, because it is just beautiful. It's beautiful and
So,
powerful. And I would just love you to tell me, just some things about your book. You started talking about the sections. You just
yes.
tell us. I don't even know where to ask, because I just
Oh,
got it.
yeah.
Tell us about your book.
Yes, it's my baby. I started writing it when I was living in San Diego. I had a major breakdown. I thought I was never going to write again, and then one day I just picked up the pen and started writing for about 3 years, and it's so special to me. It is a collection of poetry, essays, quotes, stories that it basically it's about humanity and the human psyche, right?
Mm.
And it's about healing. It starts out kind of with the journey of like depression, the journey of like sadness, low anxiety, and goes into mending, and then acknowledges hugely mental illness. I mean, there are poems in there like, I'll give you an example. There's one that represents like bipolar's like wearing the scarlet letter,
Oh,
so taking all of these like elements and breaking down stigma in a way that the general public can understand. It's a book that is meant to build connection and
mm,
curiosity, because we only think of mental health in this one arena, but it has to do with everything. It has to do what's going on with our environment. It has to do with the people you're connecting on, politics, sensuality for women, and womanhood, because that's a huge theme of the book, is also empowerment of women, and us being, and why is that, like with mental health? Well, because it's connection to body and spirit, and so there's literally things in this book
mm.
that encompasses so much that I'm hoping that people can find something that they really connect to. I mean, my search and exploring just different areas and people and essays about the homeless and things that I've seen. And so that's the book. It kind of takes you on a journey. It takes you on a journey. It's personal, but it's meant for readers to be in that position. It's done very well so far, as something that's funny, and it's not me bragging, even though I told you not to say that. But
Yeah.
the irony of it is that after it came out, within like a few hours, it became the #1 new release in psychology books.
No
And
way. That's so important.
it's so important. And what people were laughing at was, they told me like the second it goes in and out of being the new release, because it's 2 weeks now,
Yeah.
but it was for a while, and people laughed at the fact that like the next book was by a psychologist, and the books that were behind it. And I think the reason why I'm saying that is it kind of represents this need.
Yeah.
This actually, people like, it's in psychology. I mean, could you imagine the psychologists that are like, what the,
Yeah.
what?
Yeah.
But anyway, the book is pretty, to me, it's fascinating. It's my heart. The art, the cover again is, in my
Mm.
opinion, it was, done by one of my closest friends. She's one of the most talented artists, like Ash Walker. And then I do the line art within. And I
Yeah.
can tell you, you've never read poetry specifically in short, like stories about mental illness, like it. And that's one of the most special sections. So it's called "Oh Mind, Where Have You Gone Today?" I came up with it randomly because I think our mind should just travel. And like, as a writer, I never want to limit myself in what I talk about, what I write about, because bipolar helps me in connecting to people. So I went on a thing about that, but I just like
Love
really
it.
hope it touches people, and again empowers people with mental illness.
I am telling you, it already has. Can you see all the pages that I've marked already?
Oh my gosh, you're so sweet. Thank you. Oh, I
I
feel so blessed. So
Oh, yeah. And I would love, is there one that you could read to us before we
blessed.
go?
You're so sweet. There is one. It's not as I'm just gonna read it because it's
Yes.
not one that necessarily has to have a poetic view, but I want to, because it relates to a lot of what we've
Yeah.
been discussing. Yeah. Okay. And then I'll show you the artwork. Is that it's page 40, and it goes, revealing mental illness is confessing to a crime you never committed. It's pleading guilty when you are innocent. And that, for me, that was one of the most like special ones, and that I wrote. And it's just like a judge type of
Yeah.
gavel. It's a gavel.
Yeah.
And for me, that represents stigma. It feels like that. It feels like you're confessing to a crime, but you never committed one, but you feel the pressure to. However, you're innocent. And I hope that empowers people. I hope it makes people feel seen, and that they're not alone in feeling like a criminal. A
Yeah.
criminal.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes,
Wow.
so I
It's
sleep
her
at night.
it's her baby, and it needs to be in your home, on your bedside table, wherever, so I will shout it from the rooftops, "Go and get the
Oh,
book."
thank you.
I will
Thank you.
put all the links below, and I went and followed the artist, and
Yeah.
go
Oh,
follow
yes.
her as well. We'll put the stuff, all the information you
Oh, thank
need
you.
in the show notes. And so friends, as I said before, I have subscriptions, and we're going to record an extra little bit, and we're going to talk about self-love. And I'm
Subscribe.
so excited. So go subscribe and go listen to that right away. But Hannah, I
I'll
just
say really epic things. I'll really go full
yeah,
throttle. Yes.
totally, totally epic.
You'll hear something ridiculously.
It's gonna be so good. I'm so pumped. Yeah, I don't I wish that I had better words to tell you how much your advocacy and you existing in this space and being one of my people means to me. You are
Oh,
saving lives. You have literally also been a part of saving mine. And so I just want to thank you so much for being here and being who you are.
Oh my gosh, that almost made me well up. I am so fascinated by you, what you're doing, and you are completely in this whole movement, and I'm just so honored to be here, and I'm so excited for you. You barely touched the horizon and all that you're going to do. I'm just so honored to be a part of this.
Thank you.
Yes.
This is Bipolar. Thanks again for tuning in. You can find video versions of This is Bipolar on our YouTube channel. We also have all our previous and soon to be future episodes of the podcast on Apple, Podbean, Spotify, and Google Play. We spend most of our time on Instagram at this.is.bipolar. There is a vibrant community there where we have conversations and post different ideas and different strategies, and we'd just love for you to join us there. It is so helpful if you enjoy our work or think it would be helpful to someone if you could like and share and save and follow us in all or any of those spaces. If you're a listener for the podcast, if you could leave a review, we would be forever grateful. Again, thank you for being here with us. Let's get the word out. Let's share lived experiences so that we can change the ideas that people have about bipolar and help those of us that live with it feel less alone. This is Bipolar.